you have the floor. Your microphone is not selected. Please make sure the browser has the permission to use your devices. I'm going to refresh your connection. Please make sure you press allow when the browser is asking for the permission. Malawi, you have the floor.
Hello.
Hello, madam. How are you today?
Thank you. How are you?
Okay,
You
fine.
can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but the audio is a bit echoing, so I'm going to refresh your microphone. Please admit my changings. Could you please speak a bit?
Hello.
Way much better. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your attention.
May I just check my mic?
Yes, you sounds perfectly.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great
I
meeting.
think the co-chairs should be joining now.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, very well.
Excellent.
I think we can start.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call this meeting to order. Distinguished delegates, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the third meeting of the open-ended working group of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Yesterday, we opened agenda item 4 on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Unfortunately, we were not able to complete the first reading of the item as we ran out of time. We heard intervention from regional group. We had begun to hear intervention of parties. At the end of session, we indicated that we would continue intervention by parties and proceed with intervention from other government representative of major stakeholder group and observer organization. Colleagues, I would like to remind you that we are on a very tight schedule and that our time together is limited. In the interest of time, we have requested the Secretariat to refrain from making a statement on how to access document and use of microphone. And if you have technical problem, please reach out to the Secretariat in the usual way to request support. Please remember to speak slowly to allow interpreters to understand you well. And if you could upload your statement prior to making an intervention, it is also will be much appreciated. Thank you very much. And I'll now pass the floor to Francis to guide us through the next step. Francis, over to you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Dear delegates, just to emphasize that you really need to have those statements uploaded because it becomes problematic for your intervention to be properly translated when it is not with the interpreters. So please do your best to have it uploaded before you take the floor. We will now open the floor to conclude the statements on agenda item 4 on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We had intervention which covered about 42 minutes, and there were 14 parties. Now, today, this is the lineup of the parties that are going to take the floor. I have China, I have Bolivia, Ecuador, Namibia, Armenia, Saudi Arabia, Russian Federation, Switzerland, Iran, Malawi, Cameroon, Algeria, Ethiopia, and Sudan. So those are the 14 parties going to take the floor. Once this list of parties is exhausted, I will call on other governments, representative of major stakeholder groups, and observers to take the floor. I'll call on parties in the queue individually. So please raise your hand only please, when you have or heard me call the name of your country. When I give you the floor, your microphone will be activated. The status bar will turn red on your computer, and I'm sure that by now most of you know this. That is when you can start to speak. And again, please, let's avoid running through the statements. You can sympathize with the interpreters. Some of them may end up choking, trying to say something which before they can even think you're already in the third line. So please do move at reasonable speed, not too slowly, but just adequately. So having said that, I think now I'll open the floor. And as I said, I will then mention the name of the country. You raise your hand, then I give you the floor. China. If we could start with China, please.
谢谢主席先生。请问能听得到吗？
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear us? Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to congratulate you and the Secretariat for providing the first draft of the Post-2020 GBF. We welcome this and believe that under your excellent leadership, the meeting will make more progress in the framework negotiation. Mr. Chair, China is always of the view that the framework should be ambitious, but also be practical, promoting the achievement of 3 goals of the CBD in a balanced manner. Adhering to this concept, we are willing to work with all parties and stakeholders to improve the text of the framework during the meeting. The first draft of the framework includes not only goals and targets, but also the monitoring indicators used to monitor the progress of the implementation of those goals and targets. It's very important for the parties to monitor the progress they have made. We are willing to work with all party stakeholders on the quantification of indicators exchanged with in order to improve the operability of monitoring indicators. Mr. Chair, implementation is a core for achieving the goals and targets of the framework. The framework should be implemented as a whole. The content should fully reflect the concerns in order to inspire the sense of ownership of all parties and stakeholders. The goals and targets in the framework are equally important. We support them be fully implemented as a whole. Finally, China is willing to actively participate in discussions under your leadership, and we wish this meeting a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, China, and thank you for coming on today. Yesterday we had a lot of challenges with you. I think today it's good you managed to take the floor. Next is Bolivia, please. Bolivia.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone, or good day. Bolivia wants to highlight the fact that conventional biological diversity recognized as its vision a long time ago the need to live in harmony with nature. However, we have discussed in depth at a global level yet what is the real meaning of this concept. We cannot move towards living in harmony with nature based solely on an anthropocentric vision. However, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is moving forward in reinforcing this anthropocentric view of nature. This is not the right solution to sustainably protect the world's biodiversity. In the modern Western world, human beings have alienated themselves from Mother Earth, creating an anthropocentric model of civilization that places human beings at the center of the entire universe and conceives nature as a mere object to dominate and control at will. By extension, this has then caused the unbridled exploitation of nature as if it were a simple commodity. And all of this leads to the deepening of a form of anthropocentrism that is divorced from life. Furthermore, capitalism, based on the rationale of unlimited growth, is destroying Mother Earth. We need to change the anthropocentric paradigm linked to the capitalist global system, and also within the framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Post-2020 GBF, we need to take a fresh look at the world and look at relationships between human beings and nature in a different light. New insight is needed based on a cosmo-biocentric paradigm that focuses on caring for the life of all living beings on Mother Earth. And I'm afraid we've lost the speaker. The sound was very bad, but fortunate that we had the text. But we've lost Bolivia.
Hopefully they can come back at some point. Next now will be the following: Ecuador followed by Namibia. Floor to Ecuador. I see.
Muy buenos días.
Is Bolivia back?
Muy buenos días.
Good morning from Ecuador. Good. Good day to everyone. And thank you very much, co-chairs. Ecuador thanks the Secretariat for its work, and also the work of the co-chairs of the working group for the hard work that you've done to come up with the first draft of the GBF. The Ecuadorian government thanks Colombia also for the organization of this meeting. Full implementation of the post-2020 GBF will mark a before and after when it comes to us living with nature, so that we can ensure survival of current and future generations with an appropriate quality of life in harmony with nature. Within this context, we align ourselves with the statement that was made by GRULAC, including what was said about the need to have a clear structure and clear definitions to have balanced implementation of the GBF and its goals, milestones, targets, and indicators and monitoring mechanisms, as well as effective communication inter alia, so that we can correctly cover the three objectives of the Convention. We also absolutely have to ensure that the new framework includes in a clear way the enabling conditions and appropriate additional financial predictable resources for its implementation by developing countries, in particular those countries that are mega diverse. And there also needs to be cooperation on capacity building and knowledge transfer, science and technology to these countries. All of this will allow us to make it reality to implement this post-GBF with a correct alignment with other international commitments undertaken, including fulfillment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and also with better participation of other relevant stakeholders, including our IPLCs, as well as civil society, academia, and the private sector. We have to pay special attention to the pandemic that we still find ourselves in, and we need to draw on previous experiences with HE targets. So for the sake of time, Ecuador will put forward substantial drafting proposals on the proposed goals, targets and indicators, and we will also send them in writing and make them available to the Secretariat, and they will be presented in the corresponding contact groups. Thank you very much.
Ecuador. Now I give the floor to Namibia, followed by Amani. Namibia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Namibia supports the statement made by DRC on behalf of Africa and would like to add the following points of emphasis. The structure of the GBF and its theory of change should better reflect the integrated and inseparable nature of the three objectives of the Convention. We understand that fair and equitable benefit sharing is an essential incentive for sustainable use of biodiversity components, and that sustainable use through an integrated and participatory approach to sustainable management based on the ecosystem approach is key to achieving good conservation outcomes. This integrated implementation logic could also be used to formulate a simple and clear apex target for the GBF, which would help greatly to communicate the importance of biodiversity to all the people of the world. In the shadows of the COVID pandemic, it is crucially important that the Global Biodiversity Framework lays out a clear path towards the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. It is particularly important that global efforts to build back better and achieve a green recovery are supported by all sectors of society. A key aspect of this whole of society approach involves agreeing on effective multilateral measures to greatly increase the resources available for the implementation of the GBF. The resource mobilization must be at a level commensurate with the level of ambition of the GBF, and the availability of adequate resources must be guaranteed when the GBF is adopted. Let's learn from the big mistake we made in Nagoya, Mr. Co-Chair, which was to agree on a strategic plan without also agreeing on how it will be funded. Namibia would like to emphasize that the CBD is in essence a sustainable development instrument, and that the post-2020 GBF must support achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We need to get away from the idea that people are a threat to nature and place more emphasis on sound management of all ecosystems through the integrated and participatory application of ecosystem and landscape approaches, respecting and drawing on indigenous ecological wisdom. Doing so would be truly transformative as an approach, in which people constantly improve and enrich the natural world through respectful ecosystem restoration. And that, Mr. Chairman, is how we will manage to truly live in harmony with nature by 2050. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Namibia. I think before I give the floor to Saudi Arabia, I see that Bolivia is back. Could you give the floor to Bolivia, please? Microphone to Bolivia.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you for giving me the floor once again. So I was saying that we need to take a fresh look at the world and another look at the relationships between human beings and nature, look at it in a different light. New insight is needed that is based on a cosmobiocentric paradigm that focuses on caring for the life of all living beings on Mother Earth. Within this cosmobiocentric view, living in harmony with nature means walking the path of complementarity and respect amongst all living beings of Mother Earth. Our rights as human beings cannot affect the rights that other living beings possess. That is why we have to acknowledge the need to move beyond human rights towards the recognition and effective exercise of the rights of Mother Earth, where every living being is a subject of rights. Thus, we propose that recognition of the rights of Mother Earth and actions to promote effective exercise of these rights should be dealt with as an essential and critical issue within the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In this respect, I would like to recall the report of the United Nations Secretary General entitled Harmony with Nature that came out this year, 2021, where he requested that non-anthropocentric or earth-centered paradigms must continue to evolve and develop and find their place within multilateralism, end of quote. Responding to the invitation of Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity has to, we believe, become one of the first places to advance in the development of a cosmobiocentric or earth-centered paradigm. In this respect, Bolivia will accordingly make recommendations during this virtual meeting to enrich the global framework by promoting the transition from an anthropocentric paradigm to another cosmobiocentric one to effectively make progress towards the CBD's vision of living in harmony with nature. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Olivia, and we are happy that you've been able to make your full statement. These network issues can keep interrupting. Now, I'm going to give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by Amania, please. Saudi Arabia? Is Saudi Arabia? Okay, Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
سيد الرئيس.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
السيد الرئيس بداية تقدمت المملكة العربية.
Let me begin by expressing, and the sound disappears. Let me begin by expressing the deep thanks and appreciation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker, but can read the Arabic statement if desired.
Again, you could try to correct that problem. Let me give the floor to Amania. Microphone to Amania, please.
Hello, thank you, co-chairs. And thank you to the CBD Secretariat for organizing such an important meeting. So Armenia strongly supports the Target 3 on 30 by 30, and Armenia has become a member of High Ambition Coalition to push forward this important target. And we strongly believe that we need to more concentrate to not only just for the coverage and the percentage of the area, protected area, and also the important is the effective management of the area and promotion of capacity building, especially for countries of developing countries. Also, for the target 4, for recovery of the species and conservation of the species, we strongly support the term of ex situ conservation, because for us and for all the science, it's very important, the captive breeding as one of the very important conservation strategy for conservation of species, which survival in the wild nature is impossible, and with this we are conserving their genophond. So also I want to say that Armenia is now in the process of developing its MBSAPs, its new MBSAP, and a lot of things and many issues from global biodiversity framework will be incorporated into the new NBSAP of Armenia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Armenia. Let's now give the floor again to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, please. Hope you succeed this time.
سيد الرئيس.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
السيد الرئيس.
Mr. Chair, let me begin by expressing the deep thanks and appreciation of the Saudi delegation for the Secretariat and the open-ended working group, as well as the two co-chairs for their efforts in preparing the first draft of the GBF Post-2020. My delegation welcomes the content of the first draft and supports the Conference of the Party draft decision included in the document. We hope that this would contribute to limiting the biodiversity loss. There is difficulty in hearing the speaker.
Saudi Arabia, I think I have to again request you to first address the sound problems in your background, and then we give you the floor again. A lot of noise is coming through, and interpreters are not able to help you that much. So we are now going to consider giving the floor to Russian Federation and Switzerland. Saudi Arabia, I'll get back to you again. So let's give the floor now to the Russian Federation.
Уважаемые господа, сопредседатели рабочей группы.
Mr. Co-chairs, we commend the extensive work that has gone into preparing the first draft of the global framework and organizing this preparatory work since September 2020, as well as the timely presentation of the draft and all other documents at this meeting. I would like to highlight several major points with respect to the target, structure, organization, and content of the draft. We consider important to preserve and strengthen the direct reflection of the linkages between the full implementation of the framework and the achievement of the development goals. It is also advisable to continue reinforcing that linkage and determining the significance of the framework for all of the development goals. It will also be important for the future work of the countries on implementing the development goals to determine the contribution of these goals to the implementation of the framework, including through a mutual integration of a system of indicators.
Russian Federation, could you go a bit slow? I can hear the interpreters moving so fast. Sorry about that, but I think you need to go a bit slower. Yeah.
При дальнейшей доработке проекта
As the draft is being finalized, it is necessary to preserve the balance already achieved between the biodiversity conservation targets and the sustainable use of biodiversity. We support the inclusion of the 2030 mission in the framework. We believe the version of the mission proposed in the zero draft should be preserved. It is more precise and concise. It reflects the framework's main target and supports the 2050 vision, but does not repeat it the way it is reflected in the new version. We propose a return to the version in the zero draft. The proposed architecture and organization of the framework, in accordance with the proposed theory of change, is fully in line with the broad objectives and ambitions of the framework. It is important to preserve the structure, considering that the implementation of each of the targets could contribute to achieving several goals and not just one. The framework must be integrated with a system of indicators and adopted as a single document, together with a system of indicators at the 15th Conference of the Parties. And this was mentioned by a number of parties at the first and second working group meetings. We welcome the glossary, which facilitates a better understanding of the proposed versions of the goals and targets. At the same time, we believe the glossary should be expanded. Proposals for additional terms requiring explanation are provided in our written comments. Further work on the framework should be built on a clear understanding of the global nature of the goals and targets, including quantitative indicators. These indicators should be adapted to the parties' national conditions, particularities, status of biodiversity, and level of attainment of each of the targets. The indicators should be integrated via national strategies and action plans. Our specific comments sound lost.
Federation, we shall see again how to get back to you. And yet you are just at the point of finishing. It's frustrating somewhere. Now let's have Switzerland, followed by, again, I see Saudi Arabia there. I will give you time. After Switzerland, you try again. So Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, distinguished delegates. Switzerland would like to commend the efforts made by all involved in convening this virtual session of the Open-Ended Working Group. We consider it extremely important to advance our work towards adopting an ambitious and effective post-2020 framework at COP15 despite the ongoing pandemic. We would like to thank the co-chairs for preparing the first draft of the Post-2020 framework. Overall, we consider it an improvement compared to the previous draft and a good basis for further discussions. Switzerland strongly supports a target on 30 by 30, preserving and protecting at least 30% of land and ocean until 2030. This is an example of a target that has the required level of ambition, is measurable, and easily understood by everyone. Mr. Co-Chair, we would like to focus our intervention on the following 5 points and will make additional comments in the contact groups. First, the targets need to be ambitious, clearer, more coherent, and better understandable. In our view, more efforts are needed to further refine the framework by reducing its complexity and to make it more easily understandable by the wider public. Second, several important elements are not yet adequately reflected by the proposed targets, such as, for example, soil biodiversity and nature-based solutions. Third, on synergies. The scope of the Post-2020 framework includes all biodiversity-related conventions and processes. Provisions on synergies with other conventions and processes are lacking and must be included in the framework. The outcomes of the Bern II thematic consultation on synergies include specific conclusions that should be integrated into the Post-2020 framework. Fourth, on resource mobilization. Aligning financial flows with the goals and targets of the Post-2020 framework is key to achieve its objectives. It is an essential part of resource mobilization and therefore needs to be mentioned in a prominent place in the framework. Finally, on reporting and review. The proposed section of the draft framework on responsibility and transparency needs to be significantly strengthened. Switzerland is of the view that the key elements of the implementation mechanism need to be reflected in the Post-2020 framework itself, and the details of the mechanism can then be negotiated and adopted together with the framework. Mr. Co-Chair, these are just a few examples that make it clear that there is still a lot of work to be done until COP15. Switzerland therefore encourages the co-chairs to use the intersessional period until the Geneva meetings in January 2022 to invite interested parties to work on suggestions for the elements of the draft framework that need further improvement. Switzerland looks forward to productive and successful discussions over the next 2 weeks and throughout the process until COP15. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Now, Saudi Arabia, we have this proposal suggestion to make. I'll give you the floor, but in case still there are problems, then we shall ask the interpreters to read the statement. That is the alternative now. So Saudi Arabia, I can still hear this background is not very clear. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
سيدي الرئيس هل تسمعونني الآن؟
Mr. Chair, I apologize for the technical problems. Mr. Chair, let me begin by expressing the deep thanks and appreciation of my delegation to the Secretariat, the open-ended working group, the two co-chairs for their efforts in preparing the first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework for the post-2020 period. My delegation welcomes the content of the first draft documents and supports the Conference of the Party draft decision included in this document. My delegation also hopes that this framework would contribute to limiting the biodiversity loss and preserving environmental systems, as well as fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. My delegation also hopes that that the goals, objectives, and indicators of this frame would be applicable and accompanied by guidelines that would accomplish the 2020 vision of living in harmony with nature. In this context, the government of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia announced last March 27th, announced two initiatives, the Saudi Green Initiative and the Middle East Green Initiative. Both of them illustrate the kingdom's and the region's attitude vis-a-vis limiting the loss of biodiversity and protecting land and nature. They also included a number of goals and initiatives, most importantly, increasing the plant cover, reducing the carbon emission by 4%. This is from international contributions. as well as combating pollution and land degradation and preserving the land and sea biodiversity. Also, increasing the protected areas by up to 30% of the kingdom's area, and planting 10 billion trees in the kingdom over the next decades. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker, but will continue reading the statement. These two initiatives stem from the kingdom's leadership role vis-à-vis common international causes and its growing efforts to protect the plant and preserve biodiversity during its chairing of the G20 last year. We hope that these negotiations will be successful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia, and thank you, interpreters, for helping Saudi Arabia to make that statement. I think this is part of adopting the new normal. We have to be very innovative, otherwise you find ourselves not able to complete what we need to do. Now, before I give the floor to Iran and Malawi, let me get back to the Russian Federation, just to request them to complete. I think they had some few text left to complete a statement. The Russian Federation, if they're there, could give them the floor. If not, we'll wait for them. Yeah, please do give the floor to the Russian Federation. You can summarize, actually. You don't need to start from the very beginning. Yeah.
Да, конечно, я просто.
Yes, indeed. I will finish with the last part. In order for all countries to fully implement the framework, it is extremely important to make effective and full use of the Convention's financial mechanism in accordance with Article 21. All countries entitled to use GEF funding under its rules must have full access to its resources as per the established rules and not on the basis of political decisions. The application of punitive conditions with respect to a number of countries threatens not only the use of the framework, but the integrity of the very convention itself, its content, and the opportunity for full participation by all parties in its implementation. Our delegation insists on the inclusion of this part of our statement in the official report of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation, for saving our time there. Now, I give the floor to Iran, followed by Malawi. Iran.
The co-chairs of the meeting, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. The Islamic Republic of Iran would first like to thank the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the co-chairs for organizing this important virtual meeting under the current COVID-19 pandemic, with the hope that the negotiations which are being done can help progress towards saving biodiversity at local and global levels, and at the end, getting the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. The first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework reflects good improvements compared to the original zero draft. Following the current line of improvement, we still need to be focused, more science-oriented and knowledge-based, as satisfactory implementation of this framework depends on its wise development. In this regard, applying a wise, science-oriented, system-oriented, and holistic approach looks essential if transformative changes in the current status of biodiversity is expected, in which we must learn from the past experiences and reflect them in this underdevelopment framework. The Islamic Republic of Iran believes that special attention should be paid to an ego-to-eco approach in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The importance of moving from an ecosystem logic which focuses entirely on the well-being of human only to an ecosystem awareness that emphasizes that the well-being of the whole looks essential. Any mainstreaming based on the ecosystem approach could secure biodiversity and its uncountable benefits for the current and future generations in achieving the 2050 vision. The importance of resources and their mobilization in the context of a theory of change approach, along with the milestones, goals, and targets which have been proposed, all of which as the heart of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, needs to be emphasized. Without sufficient resources at all levels, it is financial, technical, and human, achieving an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework would be under question and results in the same experience as occurred to the Aichi targets. In this regard, a clear financial mechanism is needed. The Islamic Republic of Iran emphasizes at this important point that the Global Environment Facility, as the main funding body of the Convention on Biological Diversity and even other funding bodies that might join to the CBD, must act independently and irrespective of political pressures. It is expected that the United Nations associated agencies could provide such financial independency to ensure that implementation of the Convention decision and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework could be fully achieved. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you, Iran. Now I'll give the floor to Malawi, followed by Cameroon, and next will be Algeria. So Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Malawi, loud and clear. Malawi, it seems you're muted. I don't hear you again. Malawi, if someone could check, Malawi is speaking, I don't hear them.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, but when you start speaking, then you go off.
Oh,
Okay, now, maintain
now
that.
you can.
I
Okay,
can,
thank you
yes.
very much. Okay, so Malawi supports the statement made by DRC on behalf of Africa on the structure of the first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Malawi agrees with the long-term focus of the goals that are outcome-oriented and that have the balance of the three objectives of the Convention. Malawi has noted the
Sorry, it looks like we have lost Malawi. Malawi will give you the chance to come back, so please do organize yourself and then we give you another opportunity. Now, let's go to Cameroon. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, les interventions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I hope that I can be heard. Cameroon would like to support the statement made by the DRC on behalf of the African group, and Cameroon commends and welcomes the first draft of the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework prepared by the Secretariat as a basis for the discussion at this virtual third meeting of the OEG. Cameroon wishes to recall that the new framework today is positioning itself as an indispensable tool for encouraging action for biodiversity at all levels, involving all strata of society. The result is that the driving force of success of this new framework is the total commitment of all actors and state and non-state stakeholders. While congratulating those actors who have contributed to the preparation of Draft 1, we also believe that this document requires several adjustments. Firstly, it should take into consideration the wishes and needs for socioeconomic development of the countries of the South. Secondly, it should provide innovative, clear, and adequate financing mechanisms for developing countries in order to offset the cost of conservation efforts carried out by the latter to the benefit of all humanity. Finally, it should give more consideration to issues linked to the sustainable use and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. Cameroon supports the key elements of the new framework, but wishes nonetheless to make the following general observations. Regarding the structure of the new framework in which the milestones and targets are in two distinct sections, F and G, does not facilitate understanding. In fact, we propose that the milestones and targets could be better presented in a table, which would then allow us to extract cross-cutting and specific targets for better follow-up and evaluation. We also believe that a brief executive summary regarding the level of achievement of the Aichi targets, as well as the reasons for mixed results obtained in the implementation of the old framework, should be provided. Regarding the purpose of the new framework, we believe that the framework should be made more smart by harmonizing the language of the goals and milestones. I think we lost the sound, says the interpreter.
To complete the remaining bits, not to start from the very beginning. So right now, I would like to give the floor to Algeria, and that will be followed by Malawi. Algeria. Is Algeria there? Maybe they are not yet connected. So Malawi, can give the floor to Malawi.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Malawi, you are clear, but what goes wrong when you start speaking? You just get off, yeah? I'm praying for you, you don't get off this time round. Okay, the floor is over to you.
Let me try. Can you hear me now?
Very well, but
Okay,
somewhere
thank you.
there's some noise behind in your background there. You can eliminate it.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
take the
so, Chair, okay. Malawi supports the statement made by DRC on behalf of Africa on the structure of the first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Malawi agrees with the long-term focus of the goals and that are outcome-oriented and that have the balance of the three objectives of the Convention. Malawi has noted the improvement that have been made so far on the goals and milestones and looks forward to improving them further. Furthermore, Malawi is looking forward to the GBF, which inclusively captures both the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing and the Cartagena Protocol by safety in a balanced manner and gender in the implementation are leaving no one behind. In detail discussion to simplify the goals and targets to make them easier to communicate and understand.
Okay, I think Malawi, you may be having trouble with your network there. We may have.
Can you still?
I think we may have to do the same like we did for Saudi Arabia. That the interpreters will read for you. You want?
All right,
Okay, you continue. We say continue.
Okay, thank you. We also have noted that there is a great interdependency between the targets, specifically in relation to the dependency on implementation mechanism, and hence we want to emphasize on the need for linking the targets to financial resources to enable effective implementation of the ambitious post-2020 GBF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. I'm also told that actually Cameroon had completed their statement, so I'll not be giving them the floor. I now have Ethiopia followed by Sudan. Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethiopia supports the statement made by the government of DRC on behalf of Africa region. We are highly grateful to the Secretariat of the CBD and the co-chairs of the Post-2020 GBF for preparing the first draft of on the Post-2020 GBF. Ethiopia believes that the goals and milestones or the targets of the Post-2020 GBF need to be specific, measurable, attainable, and anchored with time frame. The target should also be designed in quantified or measurable terms, and they must be simple and clear so that all stakeholders and implementers like IPLCs, policymakers would easily understand to implement it. The document should also establish a direct correlation and synergy between goals and targets. We also emphasize on the need to put in place an appropriate monitoring mechanism, capacity development, and resource mobilization for effective implementation of the post-2020 GBF. The draft document should also follow uniformity of terminologies that are already stipulated under the glossary. Some terms and phrases are also broader than the existing reality on the ground when implementation is taken into account, which need further consideration. For instance, all taxonomic groups, all ecosystems, all species, all wildlife, etc. In this regard, Ethiopia submits its written draft recommendation and the details will be considered during contact group. I thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are doing well in terms of time. Thank you, Ethiopia. We are saving some minutes, which is good for us to try to catch up with the time for parties to take the floor. I have Sudan. Sudan.
هل تسمعني؟
Can you hear me, Mr. Co-Chair? Mr. Chair, Sudan would like to thank the co-chairs for the preparation of the post-2020 GBF, and we thank the Secretariat for the preparation of documents for this meeting. Sudan supports the intervention by the Democratic Republic of Congo and in the name of the African Group and a number of African states. Mr. Co-Chair, we believe that the GBF should base itself on baselines in order to measure implementation. Sudan has some concerns regarding indicators, as they should be measurable and applicable on the national level. There should also be an emphasis on elaborating and implementing a communication and awareness raising plan and on the participation in its efficient implementation. Such a plan should encourage community engagement. The GBF should focus on resource mobilization and sharing the benefits of the use of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for your attention, and we will also send you in writing all our concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sudan. Dear delegates, that brings us to the last intervention from those countries that we have or we communicated at the start of this plenary. That means we can now give parties who may want to take the floor to actually raise their hands, and we see how many would like to take the floor. And only if you didn't take the floor yesterday. If our records find you took the floor yesterday, we may not allow you to repeat. So make sure that yesterday you didn't actually take the floor. So on the screen, I have the following parties, and perhaps we'll try to move as much as we can in those orders. And please, now that we are again extending beyond the number we had estimated, and which is good for us anyway, that we are having many parties taking the floor on this agenda item. Remember, post-2020 is a party-led process. So seeing most of you take the floor is encouraging to us, the co-chairs. I have South Africa, Iceland, Bangladesh, Trinidad and Tobago, Zambia, and Algeria. Actually, I think I'll be fair and give the floor to Algeria because they were not appearing when I read out the other list. They didn't take the floor then. So I'll start with Algeria. Algeria, you have the floor. Algeria? Seems there is technical problem with Algeria. I'll go.
Vous m'entendez? Vous m'entendez? Can you hear me? So I may start? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Algeria supports the statement made by the DRC on behalf of the African region and commends the co-chairs and all the parties on the efforts made to prepare this first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which seeks to transform the relationship between society and biodiversity, but remains dependent on the mobilization of financial resources, effective mobilization, capacity building, and technology transfer. My delegation would like to make several proposals which are of a general nature and will be made in the contact groups, but they are summarized as follows. Focus on and make sure that the framework ensures balance between the Convention's three objectives. Emphasize the need to increase financial resources for developing countries to implement the framework once it is adopted. And that is particularly for Target 19. The framework should not only be closely linked to the 2030 Agenda, but also the 2063 Agenda, in order to make more specific the common vision of living in harmony with nature. The framework must address the issues of mitigating the effects of drought and combating desertification. In addition to mitigation of the impact of climate change, the problem of natural disasters must also be addressed. Certain goals and targets remain vague, while others are more or less binding, particularly for the developing countries, which lack the means, primarily financial, without, of course, eclipsing the post-COVID economic context. This requires in-depth discussion in the groups. Regarding the implementation support mechanism, the establishment of a legal framework is exceedingly important. In the same vein, provide for national reports by the parties every 4 years and a system of evaluation reports on the framework to be reviewed every 2 years during the conference of the parties. In the draft decision operationalizing the framework, it is proposed to add a paragraph inviting the parties to establish a program for communication and information for policymakers on the content of the framework. Regarding the indicators proposed for the monitoring framework, they should be discussed in greater depth in the contact groups. Proposals, as some of them do not correspond to the targets identified. Proposals will be made during the contact group meetings. Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Algeria. I'll have the floor given to Samoa, followed by Bangladesh. Samoa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Samoa would like to thank the Secretariat and the co-chairs for the development of the first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework for discussions and consideration during this third meeting of the open-ended working group. Samoa welcomes the improvements made in the first draft. However, similar to statements made by Australia, New Zealand, and others, there are areas of the framework that can be improved or strengthened. We support the global target for the protection of 30% of land and marine by 2030, especially noting that a healthy ocean is intrinsic to supporting our livelihoods and must be on the path to recovery. This is well reflected as one of the objectives of the Samoa National Ocean Strategy for the year 2020 to the year 2030, which targets 30% of Samoa's ocean to be included in marine protected areas to strengthen the national marine protected area network. However, we feel that there are still gaps throughout the framework on marine and coastal issues such as sustainable fisheries management and coral reefs, which must be addressed. Samoa would also like to reiterate that climate change is the single greatest threat to the livelihoods, security, and well being of the peoples of the Pacific, and supports including the Paris Agreement text on the 5.5 degree as well as aspirational goal and or target in the framework. Chair, as mentioned by other countries regarding their concerns about the goals, milestones, and targets. We also have concerns about the appropriateness of some of the indicators for their matching targets. Of the 39 headline indicators, data are available and likely to be accurate for perhaps only 3 indicators, and partially available or unclear for the remaining indicators for the Pacific, including Samoa, and would need to plan for sustained support for data collection, management, reporting, and interpretation. For those countries not represented in the existing global datasets, reporting against the proposed global biodiversity framework indicators will mean additional measurements, ground truthing, and interpretation back into the global data format. This additional effort will be disproportionately faced by locations underrepresented in the global datasets and therefore places a disproportionate burden or limited resources faced by the Pacific Islands. Samoa looks forward to participating in the discussions during this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Samoa. Now I'll give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation appreciates the co-chairs and the secretariat to come up with the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Bangladesh emphasizes that the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework must set out credible, coherent, and ambitious, but achievable goals and targets for parties to halt the loss of biodiversity by 2030 and to achieve the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Chair, while Bangladesh welcomes the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, we would like to add here importance on the points like, say, definite goals on the implementation of the global activities for protection of 30% of terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystems, effectively managed and connected ecosystems of protected areas, ecologically critical areas, and other effective area-based conservation measures. We would like to see definite targets covering restoration of degraded ecosystems and establishing the integrity and connectivity of natural ecosystems, ensuring minimum environmental flow and sustainability of managed ecosystems through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Chair, would like to also highlight that Bangladesh stresses on the allocation of US 600 to 800 billion per year, which is approximately 0.7 to 1% of global GDP towards implementation of the post-2020 framework, noting that you see biodiversity allocation is still in a very meager situation. Increase investment in nature to at least US 200 billion per year, increasing by at least US 100 billion per year through international financial flows to the developing countries and increased domestic resource mobilization. Bangladesh stresses on a clear analysis of the whole framework that each of the national targets must add up to the global targets to make the national level contribution, achieving the global targets in a transparent and accountable manner. We are also stressing on national planning processes to be linked to the contributions to the global framework, and parties are immediately revising the NBCEPs in accordance with the new goals and targets, as well as scaling up monitoring efforts to assess whether implementation of the national targets is culminating into the global targets. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I'll now give the floor to South Africa, followed by Iceland. South Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. South Africa aligns itself with the statement made by DRC on behalf of the African Group. We welcome the efforts made by the co-chairs with support of the Secretariat and everyone who contributed towards this process thus far. With regard to the structure of the GBF, we would like to echo the similar concern raised on the statement read on behalf of the GRULAC, and we would like to further emphasize the following. Simplification of the structure of the GBF by removing unnecessary layers such as the 2030 milestones and rather incorporating them to the action target to ease implementation, reducing reporting burden, and ensuring ease of communication of the GBF to all members of the society. In the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, we are expected to reflect lessons learned from our past efforts as much as possible. If we are seriously considering halting biodiversity loss, and the GBO5 is providing a good basis for such guidance, it has been very clear in Target 11 of the Aichi biodiversity target that area coverage alone is not a solution to biodiversity loss, and hence South Africa does not support the idea of focusing on the 30 by 30, but rather a holistic approach in conservation, sustainable use, benefit sharings that includes DSI that is reflected across the GBF. We will engage further on this and other related matters during the contact groups. Under Goal A, the justification for 15% increase is not clear. And under Goal B, South Africa is of the view that the GBF should be more explicit to support the role of biotechnology and its contribution to sustainable use and benefits, as alluded to on paragraph 2 of Article 19 of the Convention. The reflection of biotechnology elements under Goal B will provide the much needed interlinkages between the goals and Target 17 on biosafety. In order of the much-needed restoration efforts, South Africa would like to reiterate Principle 7 of the Rio Declaration in view of the different contribution to global environmental degradation, which states have the common but differentiated responsibility. We also like to state that some targets, such as Target 2, will need a baseline, and such discussion on the baseline has unfortunately not been given an appropriate audience. South Africa also support a gender-responsive global GBF that foster education, awareness, and effective participation of youth and indigenous people and local communities. In conclusion, Mr. Kochi, South Africa would like to reiterate the issue of much needed commensurate resources to support the ambitious GBF, and in order to avoid the past trajectory, taking into account the lesson learned from the previous strategic plan, the resource mobilization strategy, which is in line with Article 20 and 21 of the Convention, is very crucial. This should be supported by adequate measures to facilitate technology transfer and capacity building. Thank you, Mr. Kochi.
Yeah, thank you, South Africa. I got to see my message a bit late. Seems you were moving a bit too fast. I just hope that the interpreters are taking a breather slightly. But for colleagues and delegates who are coming in, please try to read or go through your text in a manner that helps interpreters to also have some comfort in relaying your message. So now, thank you, South Africa. Now we'll have the following, and possibly then the floor is closed for parties. I have Iceland, Zambia, Burundi, Dominican Republic. Iceland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Iceland welcomes the first draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The document forms a good basis for the discussions and deliberations over the next 2 weeks, and the time allowed in January to finalize the suggestions and the recommendation to COP15. We are particularly happy to see the formulation of targets 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, and 13. These targets have a special meaning for Iceland and the implementation of the Convention. We are pleased to see the phrase ecosystem-based approach in Target 8, as that is a concept already defined, recognized, and used by the Convention. We feel the term nature-based solution does, on the other hand, not fulfill our expectations in this context for the conservation and restoration of biodiversity as defined and used today. We miss a stronger linkage to the term One Health and the relationship between nature and health. We would like to see a closer link between the goals and milestones and the targets. We look forward to the discussion throughout the coming days. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Iceland, Zambia, followed by Burundi. Zambia.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And would you confirm you're able to get me?
I can hear you, but not getting you. But I can hear you. Maybe getting you, I would need to be near you there. But I can hear you, Burundi. Go ahead. Did you fear when I said I would not be able to get you? Okay. Burundi will come back. Let's go to Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic, please.
¿Escucha?
Can you hear me? Thank you, Chair. The delegation of the Dominican Republic supports the statement made by Argentina on behalf of the GRULAC Group. The new post-2020 GBF represents an ambitious framework, and the targets, milestones, and indicators need to be correctly aligned. Given this, in spite of the fact that we have concise targets, we have to point out that some of the percentages established do not seem to be very realistic. On the other hand, we welcome the inclusion of sustainable development of wildlife and also the inclusion of a target that's directly linked to biosafety. But with targets such as 15, which breaks down the different responsibilities for all businesses, but it doesn't differentiate their different impacts on biodiversity. We also think that targets that have monetary values, such as targets 18 and 19, should bear in mind the realities of developing countries and mega-diverse countries and island states. We have to highlight the importance of the necessary capacity building so that governments can actually implement the framework effectively. The Dominican Republic underscores the importance of NBSAPs for national implementation of this framework. It is important in the NBSAPs and in this framework to have a mechanism of implementation that will include all sectors of society, taking account of IPLCs, women, children, and youth that need to be fully involved and represented in this new framework, maintaining intergenerational justice and protecting traditional knowledge. So it is relevant to include a clear funding mechanism within the post-2020 GBF to be able to meet these ambitious targets. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for their hard work in compiling this first draft of the post-2020 GBF. And we highlight the improvements that have been made and the links that have been established between this new framework and the 3 objectives of the Convention. Thank you very much, Chair or Co-Chair.
Now I'll give the floor to Zambia. I see St. Lucia's coming. Burundi, I would like to see you back on the floor, please. Burundi. So Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. Would you confirm you're able to get me?
I'm hearing you, Zambia, but as I did say I wasn't getting Burundi, that I'm hearing Burundi, then Burundi disappeared. So I can hear you, but I can't get you. I wish I could come and get you. But go ahead, I can hear you, Zambia. Off again. St. Lucia.
St. Lucia
The floor.
wishes to, yes, St. Lucia wishes to congratulate the Secretariat, co-chairs, delegates for this first draft of the GBF. We place emphasis on knowing the status and distribution of biodiversity through inventories, both taxonomic and those applying inventories of traditional knowledge. It is for this reason we express concern that the language in the text should be more explicit, more precise to facilitate the application of the aforementioned strategies. We also recognize the need for ABS, access and benefit sharing, transformative change, and especially to acknowledge the new modalities of COVID-19 for resource mobilization and technology transfer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, St. Lucia. I see Zambia is back. Zambia, let me now use your word, please. I can get you. Because it seems if I say I can't get you, you don't speak, you don't take the floor. So I can get you. Zambia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll not turn on the camera. Zambia supports the statement made by the Democratic Republic of the Congo on behalf of the African region. We thank you, co-chairs, for your leadership in advancing our work on this first draft of the GBF, which in our considered view is closer to our expectation. We also wish to thank the Secretariat for organizing this session under difficult circumstances. Despite the technical challenges of connectivity we are facing, and I think I need to stress that, Secretariat, we are confident that we'll have a successful session. We consider the GBF as an important tool to enable us to redress the loss of biodiversity and wish to agree with those who are calling for a whole of society approach in this regard, which will require simplifying our technical terminologies to ensure that we carry everyone along. Finally, we wish to emphasize the importance of strengthening the resourcing aspect of the GBF, as the lofty goals and indicators we have will not yield much if no resources are made available to implement this framework. Together with the African group, we will be making specific proposals on these and other issues during the contact group. I thank you for your attention, and thank you, Chair, for your flexibility.
You're welcome. Dear delegates, it seems we may have lost Burundi. I don't see any requests for more from parties anymore. I therefore like to thank parties for taking the floor. It has been nice hearing from you. My co-chair now will help to take us through the remaining bits. This is work we do together, and therefore he will go through on the remaining bits of this plenary session. So over to you, Basil.
Thank you, Francis. Good day to all of you. I'll try to move swiftly through the rest. We're now moving to other government. And I see the flag of the USA raised. So I will now turn to the United States of America. US, you have the floor. Your microphone seems to be on. Your camera is off, but that's okay. Maybe I'll ask the Secretariat if there is anything they can do.
I see that they are back now.
Okay.
Maybe
All right.
they can speak.
Okay, so I'll go on to. We have very limited time, so we're gonna go and normally we would be going to major stakeholder groups, and I will take one major stakeholder group. Then I'll try to go back to the US. So on behalf of IPLC, I understand that Mr. Ramiro Bazin will be taking the floor. IIFB, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señores copresidentes. Saludamos el...
Thank you, co-chairs. We very much thank you for the first draft that very much improves on the zero draft regarding Indigenous people and local communities' rights. The references to free, prior and informed consent, Target 20, as well as traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources, Target 13, and customary sustainable use, Target 9, and rights over lands, territories and resources, Target 21, are all welcome and should be kept in the text. We believe in order for this framework to succeed and be inclusive, there will need to be explicit recognition of the lands, territories and waters of IPLCs and support for our conservation initiatives, Target 3, as well as respect for our customary sustainable use rights in Target 5. We very much welcome the inclusion of rights-based approaches in the theory of change and the enabling conditions. The drafting could be further reinforced through explicit recognition of the rights of IPLCs. We would like to see the following aspects strengthened in the framework. Firstly, protection of defenders of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Secondly, the responsibility or liability framework could be more solid and include a mechanism for claims and compensation for both tangible and intangible damage to biodiversity. Thirdly, recognition of Indigenous peoples' rights to digital sequencing information. Fourthly, recognition and protection of traditional knowledge. Fifth, a better reflection of the links between nature, culture, and the contribution of Indigenous peoples to nature, which is aimed towards a biocultural approach. Also, a more significant role for community-based monitoring of implementation of the framework through the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities at all levels. We have suggested changes to the text, which we will be presenting during the contact groups. We also wish to express our thanks to those who participated in the third Global Thematic Dialogue for IPLCs on the Post-2020 GBF, and we invite you all to read the information document from that meeting, CBD/post2020/WS/2021/1/2. We also wish to thank the voluntary fund donors who supported the participation of certain representatives of Indigenous peoples and local communities within this working group, namely Sweden, Slovakia, and Australia. Thank you. We also want to thank the donors who support the IAFB, namely the Fundación Nietero Christensen Fund and Swed Bio. The greatest biodiversity that exists is found in our lands, territories, and waters. We want to present our proposals to you, pursue dialogue, and listen to your proposals, just as we've been taught by our elders to listen to the forest and the river in order to have a true dialogue. So too, the IIFB hopes that this same type of dialogue will be able to take place in the contact groups. And with virtual negotiations, we would like to ask the parties to support the proposals that have been presented. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Like to go back to the United States. Can you raise? I can't see your flag. Can the floor be provided to the United States? Please go ahead, United States. where it seems to be one more time. All right. I can see we have over 40 observer group asking for the floor. So it's going to be very important that observers provide their statement on the site so they can be posted. It is not going to be possible to entertain that number of requests at this point in time. I think unless I am hearing otherwise from the Secretariat, I think we get no other choice but to maybe I'll wait for Jyoti to see if there is any good news. Bear with us for a second, please. No. Okay. All right. So we recognize and it's very frustrating not to be able to go through the whole list. It's going to be very important for you to post your statement. We will try to find another opportunity to provide for at least the remainder of the major stakeholders groups and some more organization.
May
Okay.
I just interrupt? We have 10 minutes more, so I think we can take 2 more major stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So let's go on with 2 more major stakeholder group. We'll go with youth, and I'll ask Sefa Tauli from GYBN to take the floor. Can the floor be given to GYBN?
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, co-chairs, and we congratulate you on your work in delivering an improved draft that contains many important elements that we hope will be kept. Dear delegates, let us, for a moment, think of ourselves as cooks working together to prepare a meal. In this case, the meal we are preparing is what we hope will be a transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework that we can proudly serve to everyone. Today, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network would like to take this opportunity to again bring to the table some key ingredients that we believe should be in the mix for us to make a framework that we can be proud of. The first ingredient is intergenerational equity. Intergenerational equity articulates a concept of fairness among generations in biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, and benefit sharing. Intergenerational equity is the foundation of sustainable development, aiming to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. It also means ensuring the meaningful engagement of children and youth in decision-making processes at all levels. The concept is explicitly mentioned in the Paris Agreement preamble, has long been
Please
recognized
slow down.
as a fundamental principle of international environmental law and is recognized and protected in at least 63 national constitutions. Integration of intergenerational equity as a cross-cutting principle in the GBF can encourage the active consideration of longer-term impacts and solutions and advance its operationalization on the ground. We propose to reinsert intergenerational equity into the enabling conditions and to reflect it in elements such as Goal B, Target 11, and Target 21 to account for the needs of future generations as well as children in addition to youth. The second ingredient is transformative education. Transformative education refers to diverse approaches to education that foster generations that are fully capable of stewarding society toward a sustainable, peaceful, and equitable future in harmony with nature. Education is a powerful tool to effect lasting transformative change, yet many of the educational systems of today, including systems of environmental education, do not yet meet the needs to achieve that. Our vision, therefore, calls for accessible, quality, lifelong education for all that nurtures connectedness with nature, fosters responsible and proactive societies, and supports intergenerational learning. We believe this is crucial and should be further strengthened in the framework, warranting a new target on the inclusion of transformative education on biodiversity and cultural diversity into formal, non-formal, and informal educational programs in line with CBD Article 13. If not, it will need further strengthening under Targets 16 or 20 and in Section K. And the third ingredient is a rights-based approach for people and nature. Rights-based approaches mean that biodiversity policies, governance, management, and implementation do not violate, but rather actively seek ways to respect, protect, and promote human rights while acknowledging the rights of nature. The rights-based approach is a catalyst for transformative change, and it can be strengthened by incorporating human rights as core guiding principles for the framework, adding explicit references in Target 3 and Paragraph 12, and by including the rights of nature in the enabling conditions. Language aligned with existing agreements, such as the Escazú Agreement on Access to Information, Justice, Participation, and Protection of Environmental Defenders should also be incorporated into elements such as Target 21. We look forward to discussing these in more detail during the contact groups, and our detailed proposals will be annexed to our submitted intervention. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I understand that the US has been will be posting shortly their statement. What is not clear is the US. Do you still want to take the floor? It's
They have not raised their hand again.
okay. All right. So we have time for one last intervention before we're closing. I will ask that the women organization Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales take the floor. Farn, you have the floor.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I'm reading the statement on behalf of the CBD Women Caucus. We are focusing on three elements of the discussion. First, on documents 3/add1, INF2, INF3. We have a proposed addition to the end of Target 21, proposed headline indicator 2101, that would read, degree to which indigenous people and local communities, women, and girls, as well as youth, participate in decision making related to biodiversity. And here, our addition is, and rights over relevant resources. On existing national reporting and validation processes, we also request adding SDG indicators 5A2, 551B, 16B, 16.7, 16.10, and 16.3 to Target 21. Regarding the first draft of the GBF, we will be presenting our text with specific recommendations to goals and targets during the contact groups, including Target 21. The second element is the proposed standalone target on gender. The first draft still fails to acknowledge the need for recognition of rights of indigenous people and local communities and of women and other relevant right holders to their lands, territories, and resources, including in conservation planning and finance, and identification of gender responsive indicators to the monitoring framework of the post-2020 GBF. Considering this, as well as the need to address the roles and contributions of women and girls, we are proposing a new Target 22, which would read, ensure that women and girls have equitable access, benefits from conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, as well as their informed, effective participation in all levels of policy and decision making related to biodiversity. We also strongly emphasize the need to integrate gender just area governance and gender transformative biodiversity conservation policies in general in other targets, including in Target 1, 3, 4, 9, 10, 15, 16, 20, and 21. And the third and final element is a human rights-based approach in the post-2020 GBF. We would like to draw your attention to the various reports and recommendations that the collective group working on human rights and biodiversity has presented, including an updated brief published a few days back. In this line, we propose to incorporate a new section to the first draft of the GBF titled Guiding Principles, against which the framework would be implemented. Language would need to be developed. We recommend including a similar one to Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, adopted by the UN General Assembly and therefore all parties to the CBD. For instance, the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is guided and will be implemented in line with principles of the Charter of UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and international human rights treaties. We look for party support for our recommendations. We have uploaded our statement to the meeting portal for your reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Yus. Distinguished delegates, we're now 5 minutes from the end of this session, and I would like to just first inform you that the statement by Yus has been supported by a party. I understand that can be done through the chat. Unfortunately, we don't have more time, and we need to close this agenda item. We would like to propose to establish 4 contact groups on this agenda item as follows. Contact Group 1 will focus on goals, milestones, and mission for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The group will also focus on the overall structure and section A to E of the framework. This group will be shared by 2 co-leads, Mr. Vinod Mathur of India and Mr. Norbert Berlecher of Switzerland. Contact Group 1 will meet today, immediately after this session, and will continue its work later on the 31st, and we're looking at various options to make up for lost time. Contact Group 2 will focus on target 1 to 8, reducing threats to biodiversity. This group will be shared by 2 co-leads, Ms. Teona Kashava of Georgia and Mr. Alfred Oteng Yeboah of Ghana. Contact Group 2 will meet on Thursday, 26 August and Wednesday, 1 September. Contact Group 3 will focus on targets 9 to 13, nature contribution to people. This group will be shared by Ms. Gillian Guthrie of Jamaica and Mr. Andy Scott from the United Kingdom. Contact Group 3 will meet on Wednesday, 1 September and Thursday, 2 September. Contact Group 4 will focus on target 14 to 21. Tools and Solution and section H to K. This group will be chaired by Ms. Ann Teller of the European Union and Mr. Jorge Murillo of Colombia. Contact Group 4 will meet on Friday 27 and Monday the 30th. Distinguished delegate, this brings us to the end of our meeting. I got a couple more things to highlight, then I will pass on the floor to the Secretariat who has more announcement. We will be adjourning this session for a few minutes and remind that Contact Group 1 will start in a few minutes at 8:45 Montreal time. Then Contact Group 5 will meet at 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Montreal time. We continue to encourage you to consult the CBD website and the app for further detail on the schedule. And at our next plenary on Tuesday next week, we will take stock of progress on the contact group, provide an opportunity for feedback on the draft decision, COP, and consider other matters. So before closing this session, I'll pass the floor to the Secretariat for some messages. Secretariat, over to you.
Thank you so much. I have 2 messages really. One is that all statements that have been submitted by the observers and have not been read, we will post them online. We will write, of course, that these haven't been read, but they will be posted online. And if anyone else wants to submit more submit statements, please do so within 12 hours. That starts now, so that we will be able to put them live, and they could be considered during the contact group. My second comment is on the high level segment. You know that there will be a high level segment next week on Monday, hosted by Colombia. The meeting will be live streamed on YouTube in all 6 languages, and interested delegates will be able to connect to the YouTube live stream through our website calendar. And so if you are interested, please go to our calendar, and you will be able to log in, go into YouTube and see and choose the language that you wish to listen to. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Basil, I didn't hear you.
Just repeating, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.